What's up, Flaniverse? NFL season is flying by. We're already to the final game of week 3. Going to be breaking this one down. This is Lions at the Ravens. I'm here with Adam, ShipMyMoney, Scherer. We're going to break down the slate going position by position, starting with quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. Take any questions you have along the way. While you're coming in, please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are not already subscribed. I'm trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. I need to update the little ticker below because we just passed 5,100. So on our way there, but still have a ways to go. Would appreciate your support. And of course, I'm here with Adam from Run the Sims. Been going pretty well so far using Run the Sims. If you want to check out Run the Sims, you can use promo code Neil to get 10% your first payment of any of their products. Adam, how did your NFL week go so far?
Not great. So I got killed on the afternoon slate yesterday, which is what really ruined my day. Otherwise, it was your typical like break-even day where I got kind of close in a couple things. I finished top 100 in the FanDuel Millie. That was a lineup that had Josh Jacobs. So that is one of those that you look at it and you're like, wow, that easily could have just been so much better. But really happy, I think, with like how I played in general. I thought my lineups looked pretty good that I was looking at. They did end up very different than they were on my show yesterday morning, which on the one hand was good because I had less Michael Penix than I thought I was going to. On the other hand, it was really frustrating because I ended up not really having Jalen Hurts, and that Eagles passing game did kind of exactly what we had talked about in the sense of like, yeah, but what if it's just Jalen Hurts scores 3 or 4 touchdowns and they're all to the right people? And that's exactly what happened. So that one pissed me off a little bit, but overall it was, I'm enjoying NFL season, I guess, so far. Like haven't had a good day yet, but I feel like I've kind of been right around it most weeks.
You told me that you're actually enjoying doing the inputs for NFL season, like being just a little bit more involved. Like, it just makes it more enjoyable for you because you need to be paying such close attention, and then you're more invested because it's like, well, this is how I thought it was going to go. Is it just more? Do you think it's making it more enjoyable in general that you're doing the inputs?
Yeah, I think it's making it more enjoyable because I'm more engaged with it, and it kind of gives you a little bit more ownership over things, where I've always been, somebody that's like mostly in most situations, aggregates from different sites. And so you're really at the whims of like what they see. And then you're trying to guess what they're thinking, if you don't take in all their content. And even in a lot of cases, if you do, because a lot of times the content team isn't the projections team.
Right.
So it's nice, just being able to, you feel a little bit better. I think it's more enjoyable because like if something goes wrong, like for example, I had a lot of Bucky Irving yesterday, and at first I was annoyed with it, obviously, and then I went back and looked, and he touched the ball 30 fucking times, and I'm like, okay, so that's like I can feel good about that, as opposed to like, if you're using somebody else's stuff that you have no agency over, you can't actually feel good about it because you had nothing to do with the input. You just feel bad about it because you still lost money. So it at least balances out the typical losing that you go through.
Interesting. Yeah. At some point, I might start doing a little bit more of my own rankings, projections, that kind of stuff. Maybe so far I haven't felt the need to, and right now I'm using the Run the Sim stuff, and it's going well. So maybe I won't make that adjustment at least for NFL regular season stuff. But it does seem like I would maybe enjoy it, just like knowing that it was my own thoughts that went into making the projections. I can see how that would be a good time.
It's also just, for me at least, like it's enjoyable because it's a different challenge. Like the thing that I dislike the most about DFS versus poker is like, obviously DFS has plenty of challenges and all of that, but like they're not really, they're kind of like secondary to like the actual playing part. Like everything that you're working on in DFS is like outside of the actual slate and stuff. So I've enjoyed it just because it's like a different, it makes you feel more involved. Whereas, I think in DFS in general, it's kind of like you click buttons and then you just sit there and wait and have no real control over anything.
Yeah. So yesterday I had a not great main slate, primarily because I was really heavily invested in the Falcons offense, which was just awful. Like all parts of it, I was like, there's no way that all parts of this offense fail. Obviously, they're going to score some points here. They're going to be good against this Panthers defense, and literally all parts of the offense were just terrible. Mooney was like close to being good. He was one of my bigger stands. Yeah, he was like should have been good. It just didn't work out there. So that kind of tore me apart. And then also in the Cowboys Bears game, I was super in on that game and talked about that a lot. Like, I want to be overweight on this game. People keep on like trying to find reasons to get away from it. I think this is the game to target, but I was more on the Cowboys side. I was like, well, they just have the better offense. I'd rather play the Cowboys. And CD got hurt. George Pickens was fine, but not like amazing. And it was really just the Bears side that you wanted. So
Yeah.
in the end, it was not like amazing. And the chalk hit in a super way. So like, I was on Jordan Mason. Great. So was everybody else. Didn't really do anything for me. I was on Jonathan Taylor, but I was also on Bijan Robinson, who wasn't great. I don't know. It was just one of those slates that I wasn't really on anything that other people were not on that really did well.
Yeah, it was, there were like 3 different spots for me, and at least that I thought were interesting. Like I said, I ended up not playing that much of the Falcons, but like Mooney was another one where I talked about it on my show. It was like, in 2025, there's not that many times anymore where you can look and be like, I actually have no idea what the field's looking at, but I think it's wrong. And that's pretty much what I said about Mooney. It was just like, I can't figure out why he has zero interest here. And then he has a bad game. And it's just like, okay, well, field was right. And then you look, it's like, okay, he was 4,500 unowned and got 11 targets. Like, yeah, I'll take that. And then it was the same thing with, I liked the Seahawks and Saints game because, for a bunch of different reasons. And then obviously that game got completely out of hand, but in large part, it got out of hand too because of the Seahawks defense blocking kicks or blocking punts and running back punts. And so like you weren't even getting the full effect on the Seahawks offense, but Smith and Jigba and Walker both, had good games with limited opportunities. The Saints threw the ball to Olave like 400 times. Like you could see that the thought process was there. It just didn't play out the right way in that game.
Yeah, that was, I wasn't super in on it. I had a good amount of Kenneth Walker, but I think it was actually under the field on Kenneth Walker. I was way over the field on JSN, which kind of worked out anyway. But the Mooney one, I just want to note, like, so I talked about that throughout the week. I was like, Mooney, I think is going to be super underowned. I talked about it on Friday. I was like, this just looks crazy to me that he's getting this low ownership. And I thought it was going to be like, I'm the only person on the Mooney play. And then I went and ran the Sims, and I got like 18% Mooney the first time I ran the Sims. And I felt good about that. That it was like, oh, Run the Sims is telling me that they like the same play that I like, and I'm sure it was the same reason. It's like, well, he ran 96% of routes in week 1, and he's getting 1% ownership for no reason. So
Mooney was probably the individual guy that like I spent the most time just like looking at because the prop market was low on him too. Like I think we had him projected for like 55 yards, and his line was like 44. And it was just like, okay, like what am I missing? He ran every route. He was he wasn't targeted a ton, but he's never targeted a ton. He wasn't projected to be targeted a ton like per route. He's still clearly, number 2 to London. And it was just like, okay, everything with this guy is right. Everybody else is just wrong. Screw it. And it's more fun when you get rewarded on stuff like that. But
yeah. But you feel good about the process at the very least. And then last night, I told you this in DMs. I was like, if we had just gotten the all of the last 5 minutes, if that had been Pacheco instead of Kareem Hunt, so the 1-yard touchdown and then the end, I think I would have won the main slate. I think I had 10 lineups in the main slate. I at least would have been very close, and it would have been the Showdown slate. Yeah, sorry, on Sunday Night Football, which I did with Run the Sims on the show last night. If you so people could have watched my entire process there. I was that close to. I think it would have been a 10-way win for the main slate if it had been Pacheco instead of Hunt, which I feel like that's just a coin flip. Like I don't think there's any like really real rhyme or reason to it. I think it could have been Pacheco. But that was frustrating. But even more frustrating is I had a solo in the mini max that was in 3rd place, I want to say late. And again, could have advanced more if it had been Kareem Hunt. So that one actually needed Kareem Hunt, but then of course he didn't quite do enough there, and then ended up moving backwards into 8th after after the Malik Neighbors catch, where Malik Neighbors put up 3 fantasy points, but it was just such a wonky slate that was enough for people to pass me. So I ended up getting solo 8th in the mini max, which it's cool, but like I was pretty close to potentially taking down the mini max with a solo lineup, which would have been cool. So it was one of those slates where it's just like, I feel like I was circling the top with so many lineups. I think I had other lineups that were like up there as well, and like so many different ways that I could have won the whole thing. And then it just did not pan out that way. And I ended up making $200 or $300 on the night slate. So kind of a frustrating one to get that close and not get there. But
Showdown has been bad for me so far. Like and I mean, it's how it goes with Showdown, obviously. But yeah, it's been frustrating because it's like every main slate so far, I've come away being like, oh, I think I played really well, didn't win anything big, but was, had opportunities. Like, let's go into the Showdown slate, blah, blah. And then it's just like never even sweating from the beginning, just unbelievably bad.
Yeah. I got super lucky. Unsigning says most frustrating was Tyrone Tracy being hurt and the other back scoring. I disagree. that was great for me.
I had 16% of both, so I was a little bit over on Tracy, a little bit under on Scatterboo. But it was a situation where if one of them was going to have a big game, certainly would have preferred it be Tracy, and it was headed that way.
Yeah.
And certainly did not want Scatterboo to have be like the highest scoring player on the slate.
So that was one where literally every site that I looked at had them within 2% in terms of ownership projection. And I said it on this, I was like, I'd be pretty surprised if it's this close, but everywhere is saying it. So I guess I'll just use their ownership. If I had just moved their ownership to where I actually thought it was going to be, because I thought it was going to be Scatterboo was going to gap him. Like everybody sees exactly what I see, like Scatterboo's taken over. There were reports that Scatterboo was going to have more of the workload. So I think everybody kind of saw it the same way of like, this is probably Scatterboo's backfield. And if I had projected it that way, I probably would have gotten a ton of Tracy instead of getting so much Scatterboo, but I didn't make that change. And obviously that was really lucky that I didn't, because I think I would have gotten, again, a ton of Tracy, and then Tracy ended up getting hurt. So ultimately, the way I played it, I got lucky that it was that Scatterboo ended up getting a lot more work. I still think he probably would have come in and taken over at some point, but
yeah, I think it would have ended up being like a similar split that we got week 2. You had the quote about wanting to get him more snaps, and the thing was actually really, and I thought would drive down ownership. Tracy's rushing attempt over under going into by the time we got to close to the game was like 6.5 carries compared to like 10.5 or 11.5 for Scatterboo. And like, I actually couldn't find a way to get anywhere close to that low on Tracy without like, just going way over on Scatterboo. So it was actually a weird spot where I was looking at the prop market, just like, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense at all because you can't even do this. But yeah, that kind of made me think that Tracy was going to be a little bit lower owned, just because I know, at least to some extent, that's going to be factored into site projections everywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, we can move on and talk about tonight. Didn't quite get there last night. Was a frustrating one, but hopefully we can win one on this Lions Ravens. We'll start with the quarterbacks. As usual, Jared Goff projected for 45% flex ownership, 7% captain ownership. He is 9,400. These numbers strike me as probably fair. I mean, we've got a number of stars on this slate, so I don't really know how much I'm going to prioritize Jared Goff, but I think these numbers, 52% total ownership, seems pretty reasonable to me. How much Goff are you getting?
Yeah, so for Goff, getting mostly around the field, I only have 2% at captain, but I have 55 at flex. Perfectly fine with that. I think it makes sense. He's not a quarterback that gives you a ton of rushing upside. And obviously, like you said, you do have a lot of stars on this slate, so opportunity cost to captain is a bit higher. It's a primetime game, so chances are it's actually not higher and everybody's going to suck. But, going in, you assume that you're actually going to need to score a lot of points to be the optimal captain because there are so many good players. There's a rushing quarterback on the other side. So Goff is somebody that certainly you want in lineups, but I'm fine being a little bit under the field at captain, assuming, and I haven't actually looked that closely yet, but assuming that, I'm giving up some Goff to get some more of some combination of guys that catch passes and are big play threats.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. So I think strong play, but not, I don't know. If I end up getting less, I'm not going to be too upset about it. I also would assume with Goff, if I have him in the captain spot, probably going to be multi-stacked. If I have him anywhere in my lineup, I'm going to have Goff stacked up. Certainly Gibbs counts as a pass catcher there. I think Montgomery, honestly, like is close enough also that I probably count him in that equation. Are you seeing, if you look at some of your Goff captain lineups, are you seeing that he is generally multi-stacked?
Yeah, generally multi-stacked, and in a lot of cases, kind of like onslaught, 5-1 type Lion stacks. Not all of them. There's like some 4-2s in there as well, but definitely pretty heavy Lion stacks in most of the Goff captain lineups, which is what you would expect.
Sorry, I keep unmuting myself because I'm trying to retweet this link and I'm just not quite getting there. Yeah, Goff sounds good. So we are on the same page there. Lamar Jackson, different kind of quarterback. Don't necessarily need to be stacking him up because he has so much rushing upside. He's 11,800, projected for 51% flex ownership, 26% captain ownership. No real issue with any of those numbers. I think if I have all the Lamar Jackson, I'd be fine with it. But like you said, we do have a lot of other strong options, pass catchers, etc., that maybe we don't need to have him in every lineup. How much are you getting to currently of Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I have 50% at flex, which is what we have projected. I only have 8%, 7 to 8% at captain. But I'm with you. Like if I get more at captain, great. I obviously have no issue with that. He should be the highest projected player on the slate. But there are just so many other ways it can go. And one thing that I do think is important to point out, and it's not even necessarily a negative for Lamar, because obviously it's good for him, but the emergence that we've really seen from Zay Flowers so far is in some ways, I think, something that makes me a little bit less interested in Lamar at captain because in the past, where Lamar has kind of always been a cheat code in Showdown, part of it is the Ravens have never had good wide receiver ones. And so you've always had this situation where not only do you have a rushing quarterback that has a ton of rushing upside, but he's also by default pretty much going to be spreading the ball out because he doesn't have any dominant wide receivers. Zay Flowers, at least so far, only 2 weeks into the season, but it is something that in theory makes sense, with him going into his third year and all of that. He has emerged as this guy that just dominates targets from Lamar. And that does make that window for Lamar to be the optimal captain a little bit smaller because of it being full PPR and Flowers potentially really being somebody that can actually rival Lamar in raw points in a game.
Yeah, I mean that's I talked about that last night with Mahomes. Like part of the reason that Mahomes is more appealing at captain than a lot of quarterbacks, on top of he's running more this year, but it is because he spreads the ball around so much. So it's like it's easy for him to outscore all of his teammates if he is spreading the ball around a lot. But as soon as you have those targets more condensed, then yeah, it is a little bit tougher. It does make it a little bit of a narrower path. Obviously, Lamar's still great. Like he still runs a lot, and we don't know if this is a mirage. I mean, it's 19 targets through 2 weeks for Zay Flowers. It's not like it's 25 or something. Certainly they have other good pass catchers who could catch up there. But yeah, it makes it a little bit narrower. So how much Lamar captain are you getting?
7 to 8%. So like I still have him right now, but I have a bit less. And one other thing, again, going back to the Zay point is he's Flowers is projected to be the second highest owned captain, similar to St. Brown and Derrick Henry. But he is $3,400 less at flex than Lamar. 8,400, so times 1.5, whatever. But
Yeah.
you do get that big price difference too. So that's something else I think is keeping me from a little bit of Lamar. Obviously we'll get to it later, but I am getting a lot of Zay at captain. But yeah, I mean, Lamar is just one of those. Obviously, he's great to play a captain. You do run into the risk of running into more dupes because he is going to be the most popular captain. But he's the highest projected player on the slate. You get all the rushing upside. You get everything. He's great. There's no like, oh, I actually don't like Lamar here. It's just what lineups am I actually playing? And right now I have less of him a captain in the field.
And potentially leads you to more, like you said, more dupes because he's so expensive. Then it's like you have limited combos in your lineup that you can play with Lamar. Maybe not the same concern as some quarterbacks who don't run because you don't really need to stack them up as much. But
Yeah,
that
you
is
can get more creative with who you pair him with.
Yeah. All right. And moving on to running backs, we can start with, I mean, the Lions always pretty interesting with Gibbs and David Montgomery. We'll take a look at the split so far this year. The coaches were asked, like, are we going to go back to that even split that we saw last year between Gibbs and Montgomery? And the response from offensive coordinator was, we'll see. And so far, I mean, actually, in terms of expected fantasy points, they're actually not as far off as I would have guessed. They're getting about the same number of carries, but then Gibbs is gapping Montgomery in terms of route participation and targets. Ultimately, it's reflected in the price. Gibbs is 10,600 projected for 29% flex ownership, 8% captain ownership. Montgomery just 17% flex ownership, 1% captain ownership here, and he's only 6,200 compared to 10,600. What are you doing with Gibbs and Montgomery?
Yeah, I'm getting more of Montgomery actually, slightly, which surprises me, probably just because of the salary. And again, depending on where you're coming in on Zay Flowers, I expected to have more Gibbs. I think they both look good at their respective salaries. This strikes me as a game where maybe Gibbs does have a little bit of a leg up on Montgomery in terms of usage, because generally you prefer Gibbs in the games that the Lions are likely to be trailing or at least competitive, as opposed to the games where they're playing from ahead and maybe you get a little bit of Montgomery just kind of icing the game out. But you do get that really big salary discrepancy between them, which I think is driving Montgomery up a little bit for me. So predominantly for me right now, they are in flex. I'm over the field on both. I have 48% Gibbs at flex, 3% at captain. So I'm a little bit under at captain, but I'm way over at flex. And then similarly with Montgomery, only projected for 17% ownership right now. Maybe that number comes up, but at that number, I have 53, 54% at flex. He's only projected for 1% captain, where I have 6%. So I do think the ownership numbers on Montgomery here might just be low. I haven't looked anywhere else to see if that, maybe is the case.
Yeah, I can look. Pull up RG right now. So RG has it as Montgomery 4% at captain and 25.5% in the flex. So that's probably why you're getting so much Montgomery, is that you have lower ownership projections here.
Yeah, so that makes sense. You can kind of probably assume that my actual exposures would come down a bit, but either way, if you make those numbers 4 and 25, you're probably talking about coming down to 40% at flex and 4% at captain. Either way, I do think that they both look good here. I do prefer the game for Gibbs, and obviously Gibbs kind of just fits the scoring format a bit better anyway. But I do really like that price tag on Montgomery. He obviously has rushing touchdown upside. He obviously also has the ability to just get completely iced out in the red zone and you get screwed, because you do need those touchdowns from Montgomery. Whereas, Gibbs could have a good game without even scoring, just based on points per reception. But you do have that really big price gap. So I like getting to them both right now. And that's actually interesting to me too, that I'm overall getting above the field, because I actually have this projected as a game where both of these teams throw a little bit more than their baselines, than they usually do, which again is just a function of actually playing a competitive NFL team, or at least we assume playing a competitive NFL team, and being forced to throw the ball a little bit more and kind of keep your foot on the gas. So I actually would have guessed maybe that I was going to be a little bit lighter on at least Montgomery. But yeah, right now, just still at their ownership, getting above the field.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So I admittedly have not looked at this as closely on a Monday morning as I will on a Thursday morning. But I'm looking at it right now, and I had seen a tweet, somebody saying, because I speculated after week 1 that maybe in a game where they're leading, we'd see Montgomery take more of the workload from Gibbs. And I saw a tweet that was like, no, they had the exact same workload week 1 and week 2, and it's just Gibbs has taken over. But that's not what I'm seeing here. It looks like week 1 it was Gibbs 18.9 expected fantasy points to Montgomery 12. Week 2, Montgomery actually had more expected fantasy points than Gibbs, 13.1 to 11.3. So it does look like they remain pretty game script dependent. So Gibbs probably.
The rushing workload was different though.
Okay.
Montgomery week 1, 50% of the Lions rushing market share. Gibbs was 41%. Week 2, Montgomery was 37. Gibbs was 40. So they've been very close in both games. You had Gibbs with the slight leg up last week. You had Montgomery with the slight leg up week 1.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, I thought it was the opposite. I thought it was Gibbs. Oh, but in just the rushing. Interesting. But regardless, they're still, ultimately, they're still pretty even in terms of expected fantasy points on the year. It's does not appear that it's totally been a Gibbs takeover. He's taken over in terms of actual fantasy points, as we see here, 21.4 to 34.4. But in terms of expected, it's just 5 more for Gibbs than Montgomery so far. So yeah, if Montgomery's only going to be 6,200, looks pretty good, but might be pretty game script dependent. And this is a game where they might actually be behind. Should be a fun, competitive game.
Yeah, opportunities have been pretty close. 43% rushing market share through 2 weeks for Montgomery, 40.5 for Gibbs, 58% route participation for Gibbs, 27 for Montgomery. Week 1 was a bit higher for both than their average. And then obviously last week, where they didn't need to finish out the game, they were both a little bit lower.
Yeah. All right. And then on the other side, we have Derrick Henry, Justice Hill. Keaton Mitchell has been inactive for both games so far, and my expectation would be that he continues to be inactive based on the coach speak. Derrick Henry projected for 30% flex ownership, 14% captain ownership. Justice Hill, 31% flex ownership, 1% captain ownership. 2 of the more game script dependent running backs in the NFL. Justice Hill in particular, probably not going to play much outside of, hurry up offense, or if they get behind. What are we doing with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill?
I don't have much of either at captain, which obviously is scary with Henry, much less scary with Hill. If you're going Hill at captain, it's just, to build the lineup where you have all the best plays everywhere else. And then you also do run into the issue of duping a lot, even though you have a low owned captain. But with Henry, he's right now projected for 14% captain ownership. At that ownership, I don't love it. He obviously is capable of just breaking the slate. But the thing I don't really like at that ownership is because he doesn't have a passing game role, and because he doesn't have a passing game role, he is very touchdown dependent, which is fine because he's Derrick Henry. But if you get the game where Derrick Henry breaks the slate, if going in that you're getting that game, it does bring down Lamar's projection as well. Not to say that like they never have good games together, but they are more negatively correlated than most quarterback running backs, I think. And so you run into this issue with Henry where you do start to kind of have trouble putting together lineups where anybody like benefits from nobody benefits from Derrick Henry having a good game except Derrick Henry. With wide receivers or quarterbacks at captain, you can then say, okay, well, this guy benefits, that guy benefits, the other team benefits, whatever. So that's kind of the issue, I think, with Henry when you get him at high ownership is like, okay, it can certainly happen that Derrick Henry takes over the game, but that alone isn't putting me in contention to win a tournament because 14% of the field has the same thing. And then now I need to like hit on the rest of this lineup, which is basically at this point an uncorrelated lineup because Derrick Henry's not bringing anybody along with him. So I think that's kind of, again, obviously this is all simmed out, but like when you try and put it into actual words that are logical and make sense, that's kind of how I view it is if Derrick Henry's low owned, then yeah, I'm willing to take on the additional risk of even when I get Derrick Henry right, I have no idea who else is having a good game. But when I'm not pretty much automatically getting paid for getting Derrick Henry right, I would kind of just like to go to the lineups where I have to get fewer things right to win when they work out. And you're able to do that with pretty much every other player on the slate. Like even Jahmyr Gibbs is bringing along, in a lot of cases, Jared Goff. So I think that's kind of the issue there. And then also, he's expensive. He's more expensive than Flowers, who I think projects similarly, if not better, in full PPR. So I think that's why I'm not getting a lot of him at captain. But then obviously still one of the highest projected guys on the slate. I have 30% at flex. He's clearly a good play. I'm not even trying to talk anybody off of him. But I would say between him and Lamar, like where I wasn't getting a lot of Lamar at captain, I don't really have any reason for it other than just like I'm not getting much Lamar at captain right now. I can at least like articulate some sort of negative about Derrick Henry, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just pulling up some stats just to like fact check some of the things that we're saying. So first of all, as I said, I think I know I'm doing it live here. Justice Hill, I said, is pretty game script dependent. I think so based so far this year, we've seen a massive increase in snap share for Justice Hill from 43.7% to 43.8% when the Ravens are trailing. So right there, that does not look like, not seeing actually a huge increase. I believe last year it was actually a little bit more. So I could pull that up. But I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation, even though we haven't seen it. I think that's just, we haven't actually seen them. Actually, no, they were in a very competitive game with the Bills. Man, they've had some tough matchups so far. I don't know. I think that we can still expect it to be like Derrick Henry's going to play more when they have the lead until it's a blowout. We can expect Justice Hill. So I don't want to read too much into this small sample size. The other thing, so I agree with you that probably there is some negative correlation here with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, but we've seen it several times this year and last year. So we already saw it in week 1, Lamar Jackson 29.4, Derrick Henry 30.2 PPR fantasy points in week 1. And we did see it a number of times last year as well. So I just want to say this so that people are not like super afraid of playing them together. Like we did see it several times last year. We've already seen it this year that they can both hit together. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, it's kind of like for most quarterbacks and running backs, I'm going to try and make this make sense. Like for most quarterbacks and running backs, you actually have some positive correlation just because like the running back is catching a couple of passes. And in general, if the offense does well, it's good for both of them. When you have a quarterback and a running back that one are both really expensive and two, a large percentage of their overall touchdown equity is coming on the ground, you need like in an average game, I think there's negative correlation where like the Ravens score 4 touchdowns. You probably don't want both of them. But then the Ravens offense is so good that more often than most other teams, you get the game where they actually score 6 or 7 touchdowns. And then you're back to there being positive correlation just because they're both on the offense that scored 6 or 7 touchdowns.
Yeah. And this is a game that I could see them both going off just because the Lions could push them and then they end up scoring 7 touchdowns.
Right.
So I guess the only point I'm making is that I agree with you. Like there is probably some negative correlation here, but also like don't be totally afraid to play them together because we've seen again several times here. Just looking at these game logs, they're the top two here. Several games where they both put up 25, 30 fantasy points together. Although again, there are many where Lamar is hitting in a big way, Derrick Henry is not. There's probably some negative correlation here in general, but they certainly can hit together. So I wouldn't like make a rule that you can't play them together, I guess is the point that I'm getting to. We got
Especially
to,
in Showdown. Like,
yeah, in Showdown in particular. Yeah.
yeah, like on main slates, I still like don't set that rule, but you can at least argue it because there's so many other running back choices. But in Showdown where you don't even need the huge game from both of them, Lamar can score 3 rushing touchdowns, and if Henry runs for 100 yards, Henry's probably still optimal.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got a couple questions about that. Steven asked, does contests would contest size impact whether you play them together? Not really, I don't think. Would it for you? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it would really impact. Like, I don't think it would impact it in that I'm not setting that rule regardless of contest size. I'm fine playing them both together. I would say that like I'm less interested in even thinking about it in smaller field stuff where you probably don't even need the literal nuts to win anyway. Like,
but then wouldn't
the
you
contest,
be like because both are going to score 15 plus most of the time?
right?
Couldn't you make the counter argument too that like we'll just like take the points, play them both?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is like in your lottery tournament, it's not necessarily that you need or you want the 15 points because like you need the actual perfect lineup usually to win.
Yeah.
So I'd at least consider it a little bit more, but still, again, wouldn't be setting that rule. If you're playing like a single entry or a 3 max where you don't even need the nuts to win, you just need, it's more like a normal NFL slate where you just need a good lineup, then I'm a lot even less concerned about it because, like you said, you're probably getting 15 points either way. And just give me the 15 from Henry and I'll take my chances in that case. So like wouldn't even, I would say it impacts it in that like the thought doesn't even cross my mind if I'm playing like a 500 person contest compared to a 117,000 person contest. But I'm also not setting that rule in large field anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I misunderstood what you're saying. So we are on the same page. Okay. And then Justice Hill, what is your level of interest in Justice Hill? You've got him at 31-1, so 32% total ownership on Justice Hill. I want to just double check if that's common. Yeah. RG has Justice Hill at just 18% flex ownership, which obviously is going to be a lot more intriguing when he's coming in much lower owned. Still have him at 2% captain ownership. What do you think about Justice Hill? And would you play Justice Hill and Derrick Henry together? And I won't hide it from you. I'll just show you how they looked last year together. You can look at their game logs.
So I have 36% total Justice Hill, all at the flex. I think he's fine. Like, I think this is as likely as pretty much any game to be a game where you do want Justice Hill at 2,800. And one other thing too is neither of these teams are have a lot of like cheap guys that you're going to feel really confident in. You have dart throw guys like Raymond or Tesla or Hopkins or Tylan Wallace,
Bateman. Yeah.
But even like Bateman's not super cheap, I don't think, is he?
4,000.
Oh wow,
he's cheaper than Hopkins. Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't actually looked at that. I would have guessed he was like 6,500 or something. But so I mean Bateman, I guess you do have as competition there. But so even Hopkins is 4,800. Tylan Wallace is more expensive than Justice Hill. So you don't have a lot of those dart throw type guys, and that does just make Hill a little bit more useful. And then again, he is somebody where you have very, very defined roles here, probably more so than like anywhere else in the league, I think, where Justice Hill is your clear passing down back. He's your 2-minute offense back. He's your pass catching guy. And any game where you're playing from behind or you're in more competitive games, he's just going to naturally have a bigger role. So this game sets up that way, and I think makes him look pretty good. Doesn't come with a ton of touchdown upside, obviously, but he is really cheap. As far as playing them together, it's a showdown slate. So again, like I'm never setting rules not to, because you and I have talked about it before too. Like the more you get into the territory of like, I really logically don't want these two people together, the more you're also getting into the territory of, oh, wow, I might have actually found a lineup that isn't going to be duped 100 times.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, ideally I don't have them together, but there is kind of like we were saying with Lamar and Henry, it's different in that clearly the offense is running through Lamar and Henry for the entire game. But let's say you get the opposite of the Ravens-Bills game, for example, game script. Let's say the Ravens get down 15 points throughout the course of the game, and let's just say Derrick Henry scored 2 touchdowns or something, but they're still down 15 points. So you have your 2 touchdown game from Henry. You probably want Henry. I assume you want a few or at least a couple Lions guys since they're up by 15 plus on the Ravens. And now the Ravens are playing from behind for the entire fourth quarter, and they're moving the ball and producing. This is probably all Justice Hill out there catching passes, moving the ball down the field. So I think it's relatively easy to at least envision a game script where they could both be good. It's not the most likely one, but definitely wouldn't be like excluding them or anything, even though there is obviously negative correlation there.
Yeah. And I just pulled up. I mean, as far as like $2,800 players, just look 5 games last year that Justice Hill put up double-digit fantasy points. It does look like to me he's more negatively correlated with Derrick Henry than Lamar Jackson is.
I would expect that to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, not a huge surprise there. But like week 1, when Justice Hill put up 11.5, Derrick Henry only put up 10.6. He did have this week 4 where Derrick Henry put up 35.9, Justice Hill 21.6. So they clearly can hit together. And same week 7, pretty good, 25.2 for Henry, 13.8 for Justice Hill. So it's again not like completely like they can't work together, but generally the games where Justice Hill does really well, it's games where Derrick Henry is kind of underperforming. Not a huge surprise there, but also not as positively correlated with Lamar Jackson as I might have guessed. In the game where he put up 21.6, Lamar put up 24.6, which is fine, but like not an outlier positive game for Lamar. I guess week 7, there's that's one of his better games. Lamar put up 35.4, and then week 15, they both hit in a big way. But there are certainly games where Justice Hill put up, double-digit fantasy points, and Lamar still did not do all that much.
So I think it's probably games where the Ravens defense is the reason that the Ravens are trailing or it's competitive. You're probably going to get good games from Jackson and Hill. Games where it's competitive or they're trailing because the offense isn't doing well, you're going to get a good game relative to expectation for Hill, but probably not for Jackson. And you made the point there. I was going to say it too, just because it reminded me of something last season. But just in general, if you're somebody like looking at this kind of stuff on your own and you're trying to figure out correlation and whatever, you could just get the actual correlations. But also keep in mind, like everything is relative to expectation. I saw somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody last year tried to make the case that like playing on full main slates and everything, playing Hill or playing Henry and Lamar together was good because you had all these games where like Lamar and Henry both score 20 points. And it's like, okay, Lamar scoring 20 points is below his projection,
right?
Period. So don't just look at it in terms of raw numbers. Like, oh, they both scored double digits, so they're good together. Like, you do need to keep this stuff relative to expectation, like you were saying.
And it's expensive, so like 20 points isn't necessarily enough. Yeah, exactly. Right. All right, and then if Keaton Mitchell plays, I'll have to adjust. I will be going live 85 minutes prior to lock again. So if we get a surprise Keaton Hill active, I can cover that at that point. But I think we can assume for now that Keaton Mitchell going to be inactive. All right, we can move on to receivers. We'll start with the Lions side. Amon-Ra St. Brown projected for 35% flex ownership, 13% captain ownership. How do you feel about those numbers? How much Amon-Ra are you getting?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot. I have 19 at captain. I have 39 at flex. So pretty similar at flex, similar at captain, but a little bit higher. 0.24 targets per route run so far this season. Not elite, but still obviously good, well ahead of Jameson Williams. Very similar to Laporta. Running a lot of routes as well. He's on the field pretty much constantly. You assume, again, that it's going to be a competitive game. They're going to need to be throwing the ball. So, I mentioned it earlier, but being a little bit higher on or a little bit lower on rush rate than average for both of these teams just naturally makes wide receivers look a little bit better. 98 and 97% route participation so far for St. Brown, again, using the PFF numbers. So yeah, looks really good. I don't think there's anything like super interesting to say about him. Everybody knows he's really good. Obviously running very hot on touchdowns so far this season, given that he had, I think, 3 last week. That's going to inflate, his actual year-to-date fantasy production, obviously, but the role is still there. It's not like you have Jameson Williams like taking over or anything like that, or even close to it. You're muted.
Yes, just agreed with you. Pretty elite role for Amon-Ra St. Brown so far. 16 targets on the year, 91.7% route participation, appears to still be the number one receiver there pretty clearly so far. Looks good. How much you say you're getting at captain?
Like 19 to 20.
Okay, so a fair amount there. Then we have Jameson Williams, who I think a lot of people expecting a pretty big step forward for Jameson Williams this year. Not projected for crazy high ownership, which does intrigue me. He's 8,000, 25% flex ownership, 3% captain ownership. Those numbers look good to me. I'm curious if you're getting a fair amount.
I'm not getting much. I only have 10% at flex. I do have 4% at captain, which that part does make sense to me, where it's like I kind of would rather, if you're going to get that low owned, very low ownership to him at captain, he's somebody where he's not getting a lot of targets. And in general, he's a, big play home run guy. And you're just going to have so much volatility with guys like that. It kind of makes sense where it's like, I probably don't, in a lot of cases, at least, I don't know if I would say probably, but like in a lot of cases, you're either not going to want him or he's a really useful captain. Like if he catches 4 passes for 120 and 2 touchdowns, he's probably your captain. And in general, he's just running, deep routes and, getting deep ball after deep ball, but not like super frequently. It's easy for guys like that to just not have a good game as well. So far this season, I kind of alluded to it, and it's only 2 games. Obviously, you're expecting more going forward. He's been targeted 9 times through 2 games, 0.13 targets per route run. He's, through, again, only 2 games, but it's not like they're doing a lot to design plays for, or anything to design plays for him and get the ball in his hands. They're pretty much just saying like, all right, keep running deep, and if you get open, we'll throw it to you a couple times a game.
Yeah, I struggle with it because I always try to make the distinction, like when we're having these conversations during best ball season, distinction between splash plays and spike week, because everybody I think correlates him in that way, where it's like, oh, a guy who's capable of having, what's that?
I said I have no idea what. I mean, I know what spike week means because it's very obvious, but yeah,
a splash play just meaning like a big, like a 11-point play, whatever, like a 50-yard touchdown. Yeah, so I'm just like, so yeah, JMO definitely a splash play guy. And I think that so I agree with you that I think that I like him better at captain. Like I do like making that distinction here, where or I do like, I still think that he is a potential spike week guy, in part because he doesn't have much of a target share. He should have, he's probably, when he hits, it's going to be because he hits for one of those 50-yard touchdown plays, or 2 of those 50-yard touchdown plays. Like there is still the potential for him to have a splash play where he has a 50-yard receiving touchdown, and he gets 12 points for that one play. But because he's only targeted a handful of times, he just has, 2 other catches, whatever, and for 20 yards, and is a fine flex play. So I always try to make the distinction, but I still, at this level of ownership, I agree with you that it's like, yeah, but because he's capable of just housing 2 of those, suddenly he probably would be the guy that you want at captain. So I ultimately come down on the same side, where I think like he seems like a pretty good captain here. I'm just trying to think through because it is always possible. Like you don't want to think like, well, if he hits, he's going to hit big. It is possible for these splash play guys to just have the one splash play and not do anything else. And it's like, great, they had 16 fantasy points and that's cool. But like, he's 8,000. It's not like, I don't know. It is possible for him to like semi hit also. But like you said, I think he's still more likely when he hits going to hit big because of the splash play upside.
Yeah. And to be clear too, like I was kind of framing it in the context of like, I'm looking at the lineups I have right now and being under the field at captain or at flex. Like he's another one where clearly he's fine. It's a 1-game slate. It's Jameson Williams. If you want to play him, fine. I'm sure you can find plenty of good lineups that have him. But I was kind of trying to like think through if I'm okay with the fact that I am below the field at flex, but I am actually even with or even slightly ahead of the field at captain. And with somebody like that, I think it is somewhat logical to have that kind of approach. Like usually when I'm over the field on somebody at captain, I probably have a lot of them at flex too, because I just think they're going to have a good game. So, somebody like Williams, I think it does make some sense. One other thing I would point out, I mentioned that 0.13 targets per route run so far this season. He was at 0.2 last season. I do think that you should expect that to increase going forward, but do keep in mind that Ben Johnson is gone. This is a different offense. So your level of confidence or certainty in Jameson Williams getting back to what he was last year should be a little bit lower than if it were the exact same offense and exact same circumstances as last year. There is some chance that he just is back to being a true boom or bust guy in a different offense where they are maybe going to utilize him a little bit differently than they did last year.
Yeah. And then just pulling up, you can see the game log here. This is full PPR. It was very much boom or bust. He would have, had a number of these 20+ point games, but then he also had several single digit games. Kind of exactly the profile that we think he is what we saw last year. But at his price tag, like if he does put up, so I guess I in best ball, I take issue with people talking about him as being this huge spike week guy because we've never seen like the 35 point fantasy point game. So I guess the distinction is here he's only 8,000. So like a 25 point fantasy game, 25 fantasy point game might be enough to be the optimal captain because of his price tag also. So just trying to like make the distinction in my head because I'm like, I feel like I've made the counter argument to this plenty where it's like people always talk about him. It's like, oh, he's going to have these huge spike weeks. And I'm like, well, no, he's going to have these huge splash plays, but like he doesn't have as many like big spike weeks as I think people think he does. So I don't know, just trying to make the distinction while also saying I agree with you.
I started to double down on your point by saying like, yeah, like in best ball, you are directly taking Jameson Williams over Zay Flowers. And then I realized Zay Flowers is $400 more expensive. So it's kind of the same exact thing tonight.
Yeah.
Except, you can obviously get both of them, but still basically priced the same as Zay Flowers, which he should not.
Right. Exactly. And then I also think Isaac Teslov, very interesting to me. If he comes in at this level, so he's 1,200. You got him at 17% flex, 1% capture. I actually think RG was maybe even lower on Tesla. Let me double check that. Yeah, they met 15% in the flex. Pretty intriguing because the coaches keep talking about him like, oh, he's earning more opportunities. We're going to keep giving him more opportunities. And then if you look at here, I'll pull up the route share report. We saw a pretty big increase after the coaches said. I think Dan Campbell has just been pretty honest in general with how he's going to do things. He talked about it throughout the offseason. He was like, keep in mind, he is still a rookie. He's got growing pains, all this stuff. But after week 1, said he earned more opportunities. And sure enough, week 2 jumped from 7% route participation to 41.4%. Every time he catches the ball, it's a highlight. What are we doing with Isaac Tesla?
I'm really surprised I don't have more in this run because I am pretty bullish on him here. I think that there's a good chance that he kind of flip-flops Khalif Raymond, because pretty much what you said. I'm certainly not somebody that just like spends a lot of time buying into coach speak because I think they lie constantly. But you do want to try and notice when they say something and then actually follow through on it. And they said they want to get him, more involved. And then, like you said, he went from 7% to like 40% route participation, and still produced. So logically, I think it makes sense that maybe he gets even a little bit more involved this week, and maybe he does, flip Khalif Raymond in terms of route share. So not that we have a super high projection on him, but I do think it's a little bit higher than industry average. So I actually thought that I'd be getting to him quite a bit. I only have 4% right now. Again, maybe I have more by lock. I do think that he plays a bit more this week than he did last week. He is only 1,600, so I like that. For whatever reason, I guess it's because he's projected for 1% ownership. Never mind. I have more Khalif Raymond than I do Tesla, but I think it's because we have a 17-1 ownership discrepancy.
Yeah, I guess that would do it and that's probably why you're not getting as much Tesla, because that is a pretty big gap in the ownership there. And Raymond, I mean, like you said, it wouldn't be surprising if Tesla continues to eat into Khalif Raymond's, but also like Dan Campbell's been pretty open about like he's a rookie, he's gonna have growing pains. Like he's been like warning people not to get too excited about him too early. So it wouldn't be that surprising if Khalif Raymond does kind of maintain this 40% route participation and they're kind of even there. At which point, like, you want the 1% guy instead of the 17% guy. But ultimately, I think both look great.
Because like just using the projections that I'm looking at, the baseline projection right now for Tesla for us is 4.9. For Raymond, it's 2.9. So I think it would be really easy for people to just kind of look and be like, oh, Tesla looks way better at the same salary. But to put into perspective, like the fragility that you're talking about for guys that are in that range, Tesla is projected for 1.8 receptions. Raymond is projected for 1. Obviously, you're not getting fractional receptions. So like you're really talking about the same play, even with Tesla projected to actually be on the field more than Raymond. Like there's so much volatility when you're talking about the difference in projections there.
And they're both at a price where it's like, if you have a 30-yard touchdown, you probably want them in your lineup. So just like one single play can make all the difference for these guys. And they're both going to be on the field about the same amount. I think. So I think Raymond, you say you're getting a fair amount.
Yeah, I have like 12% of him at the 1% projection.
Yeah, that's
because
pretty good.
again, like I prefer Tesla. If you give me the same ownership on them, I'm taking him. But functionally, I think when you factor in the volatility of we don't actually know what Dan Campbell and the Lions are going to do. We're just making educated guesses and very easily could be wrong. And then two, there's a huge percentage of the time that you're actually right and you guess what he's going to do. And then the guy that plays less just has the better game anyway, because that happens constantly. They should basically be viewed as very, 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 very similar plays, and you should not have a big gap in ownership between them, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I think I like both of them a fair amount at ownership. I think that if I were getting 4%, I would probably force my way onto more Tesla. But I agree with you. Raymond just looks better at 1% owned there. On the Raven side, we have Zay Flowers, who again appears to be taking a step forward, but not like in like a crazy high way. So again, he has, I think I said he has 19 targets through 2 weeks. So he is like, he's separated from the other receivers, but it's not like he's getting 12 targets a game. He's under 10 targets per game so far this year, but only getting 35% ownership in the flex, 16% at captain. So with these ownership numbers, he looks pretty good to me. How much are you getting to of Zay Flowers?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot. I have 30% at flex, which is around or even slightly below the field, but I have 36% at captain. I'm way over the field there. He's my highest owned captain right now. I would push back a little bit on your point about his targets, because you have to keep in mind that it, like the context of how often the Ravens are throwing, like the raw targets haven't been there, but he's been targeted. He's earned 0.39 targets per route run so far this season. He's only run 49 routes. The next highest total targets on this team is Bateman with 7. So, Flowers 19 in that context is actually a lot. He had like 0.26 targets per route run last season. That's jumped to 0.39 this year. Of the other receivers, Hopkins is at 0.22 targets per route run, but he's only run 18 routes. You have, Bateman at 0.17. Like, he is really dominating targets when they do throw the ball, which just hasn't been that much through the first 2 games.
So my pushback on that point, so I that is true, like it's all contextualized, but I guess my pushback on that point would be just like the higher the numbers get, the more I believe in it. Like it's like a pretty big gap right now, but like we just don't have that many throws, so like it could be sort of an early season fluke, just because. But if we see these same rates after 5 weeks, then it's like, okay, this is legit. Like this is the game plan. They're just going to throw Zay Flowers a lot.
Yeah. It's a reason for optimism, and I think you should be paying attention to it, especially in the case of somebody like Zay Flowers. This isn't some 6-year guy that's been the same guy for 6 years, and then through 2 games he's getting more targets.
He's a really good,
no reason to think that he would evolve and just earn more targets in this offense. But yeah, this number means more.
Because it makes sense.
If he'd run 100 routes through 2 weeks and it was the same, you would feel better about it than on 49.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's very promising. This is kind of the expected jump that for Zay Flowers. So in this context, looks like he's taking the step that we expected him to take this year. So how much do you say you're getting Zay Flowers?
36 at captain, 30 at flex.
Damn. Okay, so a fair amount. So actually under the field in the flex, but way over at captain. Okay, and then we have Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, and then Tylan Wallace, Devontae Walker. So Bateman is only 4,000, DeAndre Hopkins 4,800. So you had assumed that Hopkins was going to be cheap, but he scored touchdowns. He keeps on making big plays every week on limited opportunities. So far in the year, Bateman 7 targets on 74.5% route participation. Hopkins 4 targets on 32.7% route participation. It is worth noting that the coaches have said they're going to keep expanding packages for DeAndre Hopkins, while also trying to make sure that they don't like overdo it with him. Like they don't want him to be out there if they're not going to be using him, kind of thing. So I guess it's not that surprising that he's scoring touchdowns, making big plays on limited opportunities, because that kind of seems to be their plan. But what do you end up doing with Bateman and Hopkins? How much you get into?
I don't have much of the rest of the passing game, which I'm a little surprised by, especially with Bateman, because that is clearly a misprice, I think, on Bateman. Yeah. I think he's still very clearly the wide receiver 2 here. If you look at route participation, Bateman week 1 about 86%, last week about 76. I do think that I don't know. I didn't actually go back and look and double check for sure, but I do think they took their foot off the gas a bit at the end, because you saw a drop in everybody's route participation. But you compare that to Hopkins was 55% week 1, only 21% last week, which again could probably go to what you were saying about they didn't need him on the field. Wallace jumped him, ran routes on 48% of dropbacks. But, you compare that Hopkins / Wallace wide receiver 3 to the routes that Bateman is running, and it's clear that Bateman is still the wide receiver 2 here, and he's only 4K. So I do think he's really underpriced. I would have guessed for sure that I was going to be getting a lot more. But I'm not getting much of him. I'm not getting much of Hopkins. I'm not getting much of Wallace. I don't have Devontae Walker. So I'm a little surprised there. If I had to guess which one of them comes up, it would probably be Bateman. But also, I guess maybe I just don't need the savings that much. I don't.
Yeah. And we have some other really strong options. We talked about the Lions receivers. We talked about Justice Hill. So yeah, I guess that might be the reason we're not getting a ton there. Also, I think you have the ownership projection that you have on Bateman is probably a big part of it. Just that you have him even after kind of underperforming, just 39, or so you have him at 39% flex and 3% captain ownership. So that seems like a lot for Bateman, given what we've seen. I'm curious if that's actually, yeah. So RG has him at 27% in the flex. I'm guessing you'd get more if he were that low. Yeah, I don't know what to expect there, because we were kind of expecting a step forward this year. We haven't really seen it so far, but I would guess the ownership probably comes in somewhere between those numbers. So I just wanted to read off the quote, and I'll just read the latest one. There have been a couple about, actually I'll read. So on the 15th, so this is a week ago, on whether Harbaugh foresees DeAndre Hopkins getting more playing time, he said, "I think we'll see as we go. Some games might be one way or another. We have a lot of guys that can play and do different things, so it's not a bad thing to do it that way. The more DeAndre is on the field, I'm happy about that. But if we don't have to have him out there too much doing things that aren't difference-making things, that kind of makes sense as well." So that was a quote from a week ago. This is all in the Coach Speak Index Discord for anybody who wants to check it out. And then offensive coordinator Todd Monken on the 19th said, "We're going to continue to get DeAndre Hopkins up to speed. I think his packages are going to continue to grow," phrasing moving forward. "We have to have that be the case because he's a tremendous football player. And the more we can get him on the field, the better we're going to be moving forward." So some optimism for we're going to continue to use him a little bit more, but also we don't want to overdo it. Kind of recognizing his age, I think. But he's been really he's been making big plays. So I think they're going to continue to give him some of those opportunities. But because he has such limited opportunities, obviously can fail if he's only being targeted 2 or 3 times a game. All right. Are you playing any of Tylan Wallace or any of the other receivers?
I had 4% Tylan Wallace, which is pretty much the same as the field. I assume that generally he's going to be running less routes than DeAndre Hopkins, but he's, I think, clearly ahead of Devontae Walker in that wide receiver 4-3 mix. So I thought that Wallace would be cheaper, and I'd have actually been pretty interested. But at 3K, I think it's just kind of, if you're playing a bunch of lineups and he lands in there, fine, but he's not somebody I'd be actively targeting.
I'm pulling up by quarter. I just want to kind of see if all of Tylan Wallace's in the last game were in the fourth quarter. So let's go. In the fourth quarter, Tylan Wallace, 33% route participation. Interesting, though, Mark Andrews, 100%. Devontae Walker, 33%. DeAndre Hopkins, 33%. Zay Flowers, 100%. So weird. Okay. Here, I'm gonna actually sort by name. So Tylan Wallace in the last game. First quarter, 50% route participation. Second quarter, 50% route participation. So he was throughout the game. They were using Tylan Wallace. That's really interesting. I was sort of wondering if it was just kind of a fluke that he ended up. So in the last game, Tylan Wallace went up from 4.5% route participation in week 1 to 45.5% in week 2. I don't know what to make of that. I guess, that's promising for him. How much do you say you're getting of Tylan Wallace?
4 or 5%.
So well over the projection for the field.
I think it was at 5%, wasn't he?
What? Say it again.
He's projected 5%.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. What does RG have him at? Yeah, they have him at 4%. Okay, so you're right with the field there. But he's 3,000. I guess that's the reason that you're not like getting a crazy high number, is that even with the 45%, it's not like he's a $200 player where you're going to get all of it. Yeah, that seems about right. I think I might want to get on top of that number, but we actually, this is a game where we have a fair number of like pretty good cheap options. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay. Any other Ravens receiver? Are you getting to any Devontae Walker?
I am not. I think he's kind of your like more so even than Tylan Wallace, your standard showdown. Like, well, this guy is on the roster and maybe he'll be on the field for a couple plays and just happen to do what Tylan Wallace did, last season.
Yeah.
But you're not actually expecting anything for him.
I think he scored 2 touchdowns last week, if I'm remembering right, on his 15% route participation. I think so. Am I wrong about that? Let's see.
I have no idea.
All right.
No, you're right. He scored 2 catches, 26 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So I guess that's what you're hoping for if you play Devontae Walker. Although just one of those would be enough at his $1,600 price tag.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if last week plays out, I am in trouble. 1 touchdown for Hopkins, 2 for Walker, 1 for Wallace.
Yeah, it's not going to be good.
Scoring for the Ravens.
Yeah. Isn't that generally the case, though? If we just see what happened last week, it's going to be bad because too many people are going to play it like that. All right.
6 total targets, by the way, 4 touchdowns. For those
in his career?
No, for those 3 guys last week.
Okay, yeah. All right, tight ends. Got Sam Laporta and Brock Wright for the Lions. Sam Laporta is 5,400, projected for 41% flex ownership, 3% captain ownership. Brock Wright, 2,400, projected for 0 ownership here. How much are you getting to of Sam Laporta, and are you getting to any of Brock Wright?
I'm well under the field on Laporta at flex, but well over at captain. I have 20% at flex. I have 13 at captain. I think he's a really interesting captain play, just because he is clearly involved in this offense. He has plenty of touchdown upside. I mentioned it when we talked about the wide receivers, but he's actually second to Amon-Ra St. Brown amongst the relevant non-running back pass catchers and targets per route run. Clearly, tight ends are more frequently utilized in the red zone as well. So and he's pretty cheap at 5,400. So I do like the idea of him at captain quite a bit, especially because you do have, expensive guys to pay for on this slate too. He is one way that you can kind of open the door to getting maybe Lamar, Henry, or St. Brown, Lamar, or something like that. And without having to completely punt other positions. So I am interested in him at captain. It is costing me some at flex. So combined, I'm pretty close to the field. He's projected right now for 44% total ownership. I have 34% total ownership, but I am skewed more toward captain. For Andrews, I am a little bit over the field again at captain, 6% at captain compared to 2% ownership. Kind of similar thought process, 4,400 touchdown equity. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty and negativity around Mark Andrews right now with how last season ended and how this year has begun, but you still don't have Isaiah Likely. He is still out there running a lot of routes, 73 and 79% route participation in the last 2 weeks. So clearly on the field a lot. And it's not hard to envision him, scoring once or twice. I am getting less at flex, 38% projected ownership at flex. I have 18%, so I'm around half there. So 40% total ownership for the field. I have about 23%, but I am a little bit over at captain.
Quote from John Harbaugh on the 15th. On Mark Andrews and Charlie Kolar having 4 total targets through 2 weeks, he said, "It's football. That's going to happen. Those guys are going to catch a lot of passes. I expect these guys to be a big part of what we're doing. If we start going 4 or 5 weeks without the tight ends getting targets, I'll probably be asking Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson about it." So I think it's kind of the expectation is he's not concerned about it at this point. Probably we see that rise at some point. Are you getting to any of the Charlie Kolar or Brock Wright?
I am getting to Charlie Kolar. I have like a Brock Wright lineup, but Brock Wright's 2,400. Charlie Kolar, though, at 600, I think is actually really interesting. Yeah. He was somebody that I was kind of double checking and messing around with his inputs before the show started. So this season, like you said, I don't know if you said it, but he hasn't been targeted through 2 games this season. And obviously that would lead someone to the conclusion that he's not playing or on the field or whatever. But he's run routes on 41 and 48% of dropbacks through the first 2 weeks. You still don't have Likely. And Kolar is somebody that does have, a pass catching profile, at least to some extent. And so I was double checking, his targets per route run and everything, since I know that he hasn't been targeted this year. He only ran 39 routes last season. So, this is back to what we were saying before about Zay Flowers. And, it's a very small sample, but he was targeted on 0.28 he earned 0.28 targets per route run last season. He is, somebody that they will look to get the ball in his hands. So I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't think that long term being on, running routes on 45% of dropbacks, he's going to be anywhere close to 0.28 targets per route run, but I certainly don't think he's zero. He's not, one of these tight ends that is on the field and just, blocking and they're not looking to get him the ball or anything like that. I think that he is somebody that probably settles into like a 0.1 to 0.3 ish target per route run range. And at $600, not a ton of ownership because he hasn't done shit this year. I think he's really interesting. I have 18% right now. We only have him projected for 6%, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I just think that, again, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't think this is your like typical tight end 2 where you're praying they throw him the ball once. I don't think you should be surprised at all if they actually throw him the ball 3 times or something.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Seems like a really interesting play based on how much he is running the routes, and I would expect him to be targeted at some point in the season. And I want to remind people that the reason that Adam is citing numbers that are wrong, you look at the screen, you can see the routes run here, and Adam's giving you totally different numbers. Those are because he's using a different worse source than fantasy points. It's just they grade what is a route a little bit differently. Some sources will give you route participation for like blocking on a passing play, whereas fantasy points will weed those ones out a little bit more. So that's why Adam's numbers are typically a little bit higher, the ones that he's citing, than I'm showing on the screen. All right. Defenses, kickers. We've got Tyler Loop is 5,000 projected for 25% flex ownership, 1% captain. Ravens defense, 10% flex, 1% in the captain spot. Jake Bates, 12% and 0%. Detroit Lions, 3% and 0%. How much are you getting to of the kickers and defenses?
I'm getting to 19% Loop. I'm getting to 28% Bates. I would pretty much guarantee that is simply because for whatever reason we have Bates projected for half the ownership of Loop. Probably doesn't actually come in that way. If it does, I would just want to flip them. There's so much volatility, variance around kickers. They're basically the same price. These teams have similar totals. It's a 4.5 point spread in the game. So pretty much blindly, I think, in any game ever, if you tell me that the teams have similar implied totals, the kickers are the same price, and one is getting twice the ownership, I'm probably going to just play more of the other one. So it's not like a Jake Bates, vote of confidence or anything. But right now I have more Jake Bates just because of that ownership number, I would assume. Not getting too much of the defenses, neither is the field. I have 6% Ravens, 5% Lions. Field's projected for 11% total on the Ravens, 3% on the Lions. Not a game that I'm super interested in getting to the defenses. Clearly you can make the case of like, well, what if this game just goes like every other primetime game and it is awful and you need the defenses? Like, they're going to be low owned, but still just not getting to them.
Yeah, I mean, at low enough ownership, they're interesting. Ravens getting 11% at RG, Lions at 14%. So you are much lower in terms of your projected ownership for the defenses. And then the kickers, I mean, you have 26% total ownership going to Tyler Loop, 12% to Jake Bates. It is, RG does have it as Jake Bates getting less, but not quite to the same extent, 15% to Bates, 21% to Loop. I think the kickers, as I've noted, they so far this year are up a little bit in terms of field goal attempts per game. And also, as Steven says, the defense is maybe a little more likely to score some kickoff return touchdowns. So that does boost them a little bit as well, potentially. But in this game, not like huge priorities for me. The kickers are bigger priorities, certainly, because we're expecting high scoring here. Jake Bates, of course, UFL legend. So I will give a vote of confidence to Jake Bates. All right. I think that is all we need to talk about. Do you have any other notes on the game? Any other thoughts, Adam?
No, I don't.
All right. I will be going live. By the way, please do like the video if you have not already done so, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, trying to get to 6,000 by the end of the NFL season. I will be live again tonight at, I think it is 5:50 Central, 6:50 Eastern, 85 minutes prior to lock. So 5 minutes after inactives come out, I'll be starting my stream tonight. I'm going to do the same thing, going position by position with a little bit more information with inactives out. And then I will build my lineups on screen using Run the Sims. Last night came very close to making a lot of money by doing that on the stream. So I'll be doing that again tonight. If you would like to build lineups with Run the Sims as well, you can use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any of their products. All right. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us, and I will see you later tonight. Thanks, Adam. Later, guys.